And now, Deborah Kobylt live.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Tony. And thanks for joining us today for Deborah Kobylt Live. We have a wonderful guest that I think you'll really enjoy. Author Sheryl Benko. Thanks for being here. You wrote the book, The Last of Will. Great to have you here, Cheryl.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much.
However, before you wrote your first book, you've been very busy in the film business. Currently, you are a post production supervisor, and you've worked on many, many films in your career, from Tombstone, Titanic, Inglorious Bastards, Thor, Savages, Scooby Doo. There's so many, right? It would take me a half hour just to go through all the stuff that you've worked on. So, you're quite an
And
esteemed person in the film business. So, thanks
it's,
again.
oh, thank you. It's kind of funny. I'll be flipping through the channels sometimes and I'll see a movie randomly and be like, oh, I worked on that. Oh,
Right, right.
it might even be something I just forgot about, but it just suddenly has popped up and, it all comes flooding back. But
That's pretty exciting. But what made you decide to pivot for a bit and go from filmmaking to writing your first book?
well, I had written screenplays and when I got this idea for the story for The Last of Will, I at first thought I would do it as a screenplay. But
Ah,
the issue that or the thing that made me pivot to wanting to do a book was that I had had a script that went out as a spec. CAA was hip pocketing me at the time, which means they were representing me for that project. And
ah.
it went out as a spec, got meetings all over town. Even Steven Spielberg read it. I mean, it got very legitimate attention, but it didn't sell because everybody said, we love the writing, but it's not based on anything. And
Ah.
they were averse to developing something that didn't have a core, foundation to it, like already a built-in following. And
Hmm.
so I had this idea for the story, and I thought, okay, well, I know, instead of, at that time, self-publishing was sort of coming into vogue, and I thought, I know, I'll write it as a book, and then I'll do the screenplay, and then when people say, what's it based on, I can say, here's the book. So it was my brilliant backdoor way to sell a screenplay, which I went into having no idea exactly how hard or time consuming it is to write a book. And it took over the period of 7 years, learned that in full detail.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Tell us what it's about so we can get people excited about running out and getting it.
Oh, it's told first person by a 15-year-old girl named Greer, who I think, for better or worse, is probably my 15-year-old inner voice. Um, but I always heard the story in first person because I love things like David Sedaris, when he, can convey so many things internally that as a narrative, might not translate the same way. So it's told by her that she's on the cusp of getting her driver's license. She's 15. She has all of so that's her sole focus, is she's trying to just get to that threshold in life. Her dad has just lost his job because of downsizing, and her mom is trying to keep her florist business afloat. So their family's kind of struggling financially, and her dad, on a whim, takes a job as a groundskeeper at a cemetery. And he gets the task of driving a man's ashes to an out-of-state funeral. And this falls over Greer's spring break, so she's forced to go with him. And they of course break down in Middle America. So it's her and her dad and an urn stuck in farm country trying to get this man to his funeral. So
And what I love are all the different stories that she creates about this man. And this man's name is,
well, his name is William, and her
right.
dad's name is Will. So she
Mhm.
immediately makes that connection, and her dad just keeps telling her, "We can't pry into this man's life. It's none of our business. Stop stop nosing around." But she becomes inherently sort of fascinated by this man in the urn, and wants to learn more about him and why someone would have strangers drive them to their final resting place.
It's an extraordinary story. What gave you the idea to do this? Like, what happened in your childhood that you thought,
Oh God.
No, like what inspired this, right? When you were younger, because you said, you may be Greer.
Well, I just think, the snarkiness and just sort of just the inherent kind of curiosity about things. I was always very curious growing up. And, I loved movies. I loved characters and just kind of delving into the psyche of why people do what they do. And when I was younger, I would perform in talent shows, and I would write, and I was always drawing and doing something creative to try to explore the world around me. And I think that teenagers are, Greer is sort of in some levels, she's, that very self-indulged teenager who's just focused on her needs and what she wants. But on another plane, she's also very observant in that she sees people around her, and that little judgmental side comes out. So I think in that sense that Greer is probably a writer at heart, but she doesn't know it yet, because I find that writers tend to just be observers by and large.
Very, very true. I mean, and this person, this deceased person in the urn sort of becomes a friend to her, right?
Yeah, and I think she kind of feels like it's important to be his friend, because she starts really wondering about him, and in her mind sort of developing this idea of, what if he doesn't have anybody else? What if the reason he has strangers doing this is because he doesn't have anyone else in his life? And so I think in a way she feels responsible, and she feels connected to him. Like it's important that she be able to get him to where he needs to go, and make sure that he gets there safely, and also has someone there to acknowledge that this man had a life, and he made an impact. And I think that becomes, you see her grow up a little bit over the course of the book in realizing that, and that it's about a bigger purpose than just what she wants in the moment.
Right. It's interesting also that you made her 15 years old, right? If she were 8 years old, it would have been a totally different story. But at 15, we're learning more about ourselves, right? So much more. We're bridging over into adulthood. So it was also a very appropriate age to make her at the age of 15, because she was very thoughtful about, who is he and where is he going? In fact, where am I going? Where's my dad going to be going? All the thoughts about our own mortality, right? And her own mortality.
Yeah, and really, I think part of the reason I sort of honed in on 15 is I remember that as being a very seminal year in my life, because you are on the cusp of getting your driver's license. It's sort of a turning point in your teenage years. But also I remember vividly that the summer I was turning 16, I had an uncle who was in the hospital and who was dying. And it was really the first time in my life that I kind of experienced death up close. I hadn't really, I had my grandfather died when I was young. I didn't remember him, in great detail, but this was something where I was old enough that I had an awareness, and I could really understand, I think for the first time, get a sense of the permanence of death, and to realize that people are only here for a limited window, and we need to appreciate them, and we need to experience life not on just a daily basis, but a minute by minute basis, to really appreciate, to really take it in. And that gets lost in a lot of the noise, especially as I think for teenagers. It's easy to get caught up in everything going on and lose sight of what's right in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, the book is about relationships, including the relationship she has with her own father. Mm-hmm. And you do see from the beginning, at the start of this trip, when she didn't even really want to go, to the end, just how much she's transformed. It's really a delightful piece. Tell me a little bit about you growing up. You grew up in Colorado, right?
Yes.
And you told us that you enjoyed film and you were curious. How did you step into the world of film? And you landed pretty early with some great mentors, didn't you?
I was very lucky. About a year after I graduated college, I At that time, there were a lot of Westerns shooting in Arizona because of Unforgiven had come out and had won the Oscar. So Westerns had sort of come back into the culture. And so I went down to Tucson because we had friends living there that I was able to stay with. And Tombstone was setting up to shoot there at that time. So I kept going to the production office, taking in resumes, calling, trying to walk that fine line of being persistent without being a pain in the neck. And I was very lucky. I got hired as a day player PA, and that evolved into being a full-time PA. And as a first film, I didn't even realize just how big it was at the time, because it was big Western, a lot of Hollywood stars, and just costumes and horses, and it was just everything that you think of when you think of classic Hollywood. And the movie has become such a classic in itself that it's just an incredible thing to think, wow, I was there. And I went to see it twice in the theater just to see my name on screen, and it was just a thrill all the way around.
That's the big one, when you see your name go on screen. I was in a film once. I mean, the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and I remember I had my camera ready, and I'm like, okay, here goes my name. And it was the same thing, and I went a couple of times to take a photo of my name. I mean, kind of pathetic, but that's kind of what you do when you're younger, right? But what's interesting, you said you didn't realize it was as big as it was, because when you're on the set, there's so much work going on, it just doesn't seem like a big production. It's almost like office work, and fixing a costume over here, and somebody's shoes have to be polished or whatever. It doesn't seem like this big thing until you're actually in the theater, don't you think?
Yeah, and it is work. I mean, there's a reason that it's not something that everybody does, because it's long hours, it's a lot of work, and the majority of it is not glamorous. Glamorous things are, you go to a premiere, or you go to a screening, or this or that, but those are very few and far between. The majority of it is work that people never see, and especially in post, a lot of it happens in dark rooms and in isolation, and the people aren't celebrated who are behind the camera. So it's just but you see this incredible team of craftsmen and people who are just so immensely talented at what they do. And that's the greatest feeling in the world, is when you see it all come together. And but yeah, it's even now it's an amazing thing for me, having been in this industry for 25 years. It's never lost on me when I'm in a room with people like Oliver Stone or Quentin Tarantino, or I just recently worked with the amazing Alan Ball, who, with me being incredible, writer, Alan Ball is just, I was just, yes, please. I begged for that opportunity to get to do that movie, because it was just, I love 6 Feet Under, and I'm just such a fan of his work. And when you can be in the room with talented people like this and just take in everything that you can to just learn, it makes you better at what you do, and it makes your love for the industry just even greater.
Yeah. Do you have any stories from working with Quentin or even Oliver? Because I mean, just like you said, they are the greats in this business, and we spoke a little on the phone, and these people seem bigger than life for those who don't know them, but in fact, they're just very talented and dedicated people. And when you sit down with them, they're just sort of regular folks who just work super hard and are very talented, right?
They are. And I think the common thread among all great directors and great talents is they love what they do. Yeah. And it transcends everything, and it permeates all of their work. And Quentin, you know him, he's like a big overgrown kid. You talk to him, and there's just such energy and enthusiasm for what he does. And you ask him about, I was telling him about this horror movie that I loved when I was a kid, this really campy movie called The Hand. And he said, oh, well, if you like that one, you should watch, and he rattled off like 20 other movies. And And when you talk to Quentin, you ask him a question about movies, you get a 20-minute answer.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I spoke with him at a press club event, and he was being honored with Anne Margaret. And I was talking to him about the Little Italy area in Los Angeles. And he went on for 20 minutes about being Italian, and I have to know about it. Where can I go get the food? And we've stayed in touch over that. So you're right. He's a passionate guy. But the fact that you also took all this in, you knew intrinsically that you were working with some of the greatest talents in the business. Oliver Stone, what's he like?
Oliver, he can be very intimidating when you first meet him, but I there was a Post executive I spoke to once who said, yeah, it's like seeing Charles Manson sitting across your desk. You don't quite know what to do. But
oh my goodness.
But when you get to know him, he's funny, and I love Oliver. I wouldn't hesitate to work with Oliver again. He's just in such a talent, and again, just so focused on getting it exactly right and making every moment on screen count. And I just think that that's tremendous when you see people who've been doing it that long and are that celebrated and that successful, who even they never lose sight of the opportunity that they have, and they appreciate it, and they celebrate it in every movie that they do.
Titanic, you said that you got to know some of the people who you worked with quite closely, right? Could you tell us about that?
I was, I got to work, I was the post-production PA. I got hired for 3 days and I worked 9 months, which was kind of, the par for the course on Titanic. Once you got on that movie, you didn't get off.
You never got off.
But part of my job as a post PA was I would pick up the actors at the hotels or their home and take them to ADR, which is where we do re-recording, automated dialogue replacement, where the actors come in and they re-record their lines. And one of the things I would do is I would have to pick up Kate Winslet every time she came into town, and her and I became friends, I think, in a large respect, because we would hang out together, we'd go to Starbucks, and it was incredible to see at that point in her career someone who still was largely unrecognizable at that point. We would go into Starbucks or around to different places in LA. People didn't know who she was, or occasionally, if it was like an art house crowd, somebody might recognize her. And then when she came back for the Oscars, we went out to lunch a couple days after the Oscars when she came into town, and everything changed. It's like people coming up during lunch, oh, will you sign my napkin? Will you sign? Can I take a picture? And I saw like how her whole world changed with that one movie, and it really, it was a striking thing to see up close, because you realize the value of anonymity. You don't really understand the value of it until it's gone, and then she can't go anywhere, and without people coming up to her, and I think that's one of the interesting things about working in movies, is that I have the advantage of sort of I can step back from it, from the celebrity of it all, and get to know actors on a more just personal, casual basis when they come into work. We'll talk about their cat, or their, oh, I'm redecorating my house, or something like that. And and you get to talk to the person versus the celebrity that they are forced to so often be in public.
So you said it took you 7 years that you were working on this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time. What was the process like? I mean, you said it was a little more difficult than you had expected. Why was that? Because you were trying to formulate it and get it all down so that it made sense and flowed? What was it? Because there's so many people out there, actually, Cheryl, who really want to write a book. They have an extraordinary idea, and they haven't the faintest idea on how to go from A all the way to the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, and it is. It's a tremendous commitment. And I think the thing for me was just the thinking of writing it in the structure of not only being first person, where you're inside this character's head, so you're basically living in her head for the duration of the book, but also just the format of writing a book versus writing a screenplay. In a screenplay, everything is written with the mind, being mindful of the visual. How is this going to look? How is this going to translate on screen? Because a lot of information is conveyed visually in a screenplay, based on your environment and your sets, or what the character is wearing, or something. Whereas in a book, it's up to you as the author to create the world and to put in those descriptions, and know that your reader, by and large, is going to have their own picture in their mind of who Greer is, or what their environment looks like. And on the cover of the book, like, we have Greer's jeans and her tennis shoes and that, but it was very important to me that we not show what she looks like, because I wanted people, I wanted people to have their own image of Greer. Who is she? You know, does she look like your daughter, or your neighbor, or your, you know, or somebody you were friends with when you were 15? You know, who does she look like? Or do you put, people always ask me, do you have an actor in mind who would play this? And I really don't. I mean, it's just sort of, I have an image in my head of who Greer is, but she's not really the embodiment of one person over another. And so I think that's part of the beauty of a book, is that you can immerse yourself into the world in your own interpretation of it.
Right. You see who you want. In fact, I was staring at the little, you know, the feet here, and I was thinking, well, is the dad in there? I mean, it was interesting how he's not. The urn is there, right? But dad's not there. And then there's a few little characters that they find along the way. But therefore, it's centered around Greer and this man, Will, inside of the urn, or who was a man inside of the urn, this person who was there, that she was so curious about, needed to know about. So now that this is in book form, are we going to see this on the screen anywhere? What's your plan for it?
I'm going to write the screenplay for it, and I've sent it out to some people, producers who I know, who have it in hand. And so hopefully, when, you know, production, obviously, like so many industries right now, is been very streamlined for what can be done in this point in time. But hopefully, once things start getting back to normal in the world, and production starts up again, then I do hope that we can get it, that it can be developed to ideally be a movie one day, because that was always the intent of writing a story that I think could translate well into on the screen, but also something that I hope holds up as a book itself. Like, I want them to, they're very different mediums, and so I hope that the integrity of the book holds up, but that it also can be something that will play well as a movie.
She sat with me, and she continues to sit with me. That's the way it was written, you know. And I have an image in my head also of what she looks like and what she is like. This is really weird. I have like a Pippi Longstocking sort of view of her, not as a redhead, but just sort of the way she navigates through life. Now, I don't know if that's your vision of her, but that's the beauty of a book, right? That's who I saw. Yeah, that's who I saw.
And I think that, you know, we see little beats in each character that we recognize either in ourselves or in somebody we know. So it sort of takes on that form then in our minds of, oh yeah, I know this person. I know what they would be.
And it brings you back to being 15, which, as we talked about earlier, is a very formative time. And the thought of going cross country with my dad, when all I wanted to do at that age or meet boys, would be like very difficult. So I was going back to, oh my gosh, what was I doing at 15? It's just a terrific read, and just so well done.
Thank you.
What are you currently working on? Because I know you're working on a few things, including working with Alan Ball, correct?
I just, I recently, in the last year, worked on the film Uncle Frank with Alan Ball, which is on Amazon. It's a beautiful movie, very indicative of Alan's work. There's humor and heart, and just a lot of beautiful emotion in it. And then I'm right now working on helping a friend with a delivery for an Indian film to Netflix. It's a really wonderful story called Skater Girl, about a young girl in the slums of India who takes up skateboarding. and sort of finds that as a release and an outlet. And then I'm also developing with a dear friend a documentary that he's a director friend. Actually, Leon Jewson, my cover artist for my book, he's an animation director. And we're developing a documentary on an art installation called The Strangers Project, which is based in New York. And it's a really incredible piece that we saw when we were out there, where people submit stories from their lives, and they go in and they write a one-page handwritten on a single sheet of paper, just a story from their life, and they write it in the moment, and then the stories are displayed in different venues. And
that's exciting, actually. Where is that going on? And should there be COVID and we can't go and physically see it, how can we be a part of that?
Well, that's the thing right now with COVID. They've not been able to do the in-person installations, but it's online on Instagram under the Strangers Project. The founder, Brandon Doman, he puts stories online, and so you can read a lot of the stories, or on strangersproject.com. He has a lot of the stories. He's collected over 60,000 stories from people from all walks of life, all ages, people from all over the world.
That's exciting. That's actually very exciting. I'm going to look that up. That's pretty cool.
It is, and it's fascinating. And with COVID, it's obviously, as it's done with so many projects, is it's shaped our approach to how we're going to do this project, because having those installations not be readily available to people, we're going to focus it not only as what happens when a person, this is his livelihood, this is Brandon, this is what he's done for years, and not only has he now had to lose that aspect, but what happens when art is lost in this time of just pandemic and isolation. And the irony is that the Strangers Project is a story that's all about connecting people. That the objective is all about making you realize that the stranger next to you is really not that far removed from what your life is, and that we all have these different experiences and different feelings. And so at a time when a project like that is desperately needed is when it's not able to be available to people because of the pandemic. So,
yeah, it would be great if somehow it could be available, as a virtual experience, because I was just talking to two friends this morning about how the isolation is definitely getting to me, but also the lack of being able to visit the arts. I'm someone who needs the arts in my life, and people too, like to see them and laugh with them in person over a cup of coffee, and to go see an exhibit or something, a small theater, which I love to go to small theater here in LA. I did the same when I lived in New York. I miss those experiences, and I know everyone else does too who enjoys it. So that's the hard part, right? And as this continues to lag on, I think if we're fortunate enough to be okay, that's the tough part, I think. So I love that he's doing this, but it'd be great if we could all somehow see it virtually. I know I would watch it.
Yeah, and so we're figuring out ways to shoot it actually where people can record themselves and we're doing readings of a lot of the different stories. And have actor friends who have recorded themselves reading the stories, because one of the fascinating things about it, everything's anonymous with it. So you don't know sometimes even if it's a man or a woman who wrote it or how old they are. So you can really, just like with a book, you can really bring a lot of different imagery into the narrative. It could have been this person who wrote it, could have been this person. And so that's really given us an opportunity to explore it with a lot of different actors. And every one of our actor friends who has done these readings has said, wow, this is really something special. And so we hope that we bring it to a much wider audience and make it available to people, that when hopefully things do get back to normal, it will be in a city near you.
Yeah, I would enjoy that. I just want to circle back to one thing. You were talking about working currently. The name of the film is the female director from India.
The film is called Skater Girl. And
Skater Girl.
it's a director named Manjari Makajani, who's just incredible. She's just so sharp and smart and just incredibly adept at just all different aspects of filmmaking. And it's wonderful to see a woman thriving in that position and to really just see her work come together and to be some small part of it. I mean, that's really how I view my role. Is I'm just just
you're
playing
a
a part
connector.
to,
You're connecting.
and
You're
just
part
trying
of it.
to help them get this out into the world. So whatever I can do to help facilitate that is always a privilege. And but it's a really lovely movie, and it's going to be out on Netflix this year sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but
Skater Girl. Okay, I'm glad you told me, and because I also want to give a shout out to her, so that's great. I don't know. I really enjoyed talking to you. Any final words you want to tell our audience about your wonderful book, The Last of Will? Please pick it up. It's terrific. You can get it on Amazon. Also, I guess on your website, people can just click on and order the book. Any final words, Cheryl?
Well, I'm working on a new story that I hope to have out this year, that people can hopefully look forward to, called Chime Up, a little story for more children based storytelling, like a child's story, but for adults. So I know that sounds very vague, but but that's sort of
not really.
That's sort of what I've been spending some of my time during the pandemic to do. And I think there's going to be some tremendous art coming out of this time in the world. So I hope that's one thing we can hold on to and look back on this time as being a very prolific time for art and people to find that inner voice.
Yeah, because with so much difficulty, people, that's how people get it out. Those who were writers and artists and whatever. I think you're right about that. I really do. So Chime Up is your next project. So everyone, please pick this up, The Last of Will. I really enjoyed it very, very much. And like I said, I saw myself in this, and my husband read some of it and he started thinking about what he was like as a 15-year-old boy. So there's a lot there's a lot that you can get out of this. I enjoyed it very much, and we'll keep up with what you're doing, Cheryl.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking the time. And everybody, thanks for being here and joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. You can see us, of course, on YouTube, on Facebook, on IGTV. And then, of course, our show is then transferred over into audio only. And you can find us on Amazon, iHeart, Apple Podcasts. Honestly, anywhere that you get your podcasts, you'll find us. Deborah Kobylt Live. Joining us today is Sheryl Benko and her book, The Last of Will. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Take care and have a safe one. Bye-bye.